In life, we all encounter obstacles, and those obstacles come in all different shapes, sizes, and forms. The question is, how do we handle those obstacles? Do we attack them head on, or do we allow them to make us quit? Welcome to the No Quit Living podcast, where we aim to motivate and inspire listeners to never give up on themselves, their dreams, or their goals. We will interview successful people from all walks of life as they share their no-quit stories when they had the choice to give up or give in, but they didn't. We thank you for listening, and we hope to be that jolt of positivity as you go for your greatness. Welcome to episode number 177 of the No Quit Living podcast. I'm your host, Christopher J. Worth, and today's theme of the day is owning your morning. Our quote of the day actually comes to us from today's guest, Robin Sharma. All change is hard at first, messy in the middle, and gorgeous at the end. Today's episode is sponsored by the good people over at West Fair Communications, who publish the Westchester County Business Journal and the Fairfield County Business Journal. These newspapers do a wonderful job in covering all aspects of the business world within two of the most influential markets in the New York metropolitan area. You can also take advantage of their daily news feeds, which keep track on the companies and thought leaders in these important regions. For more information, take a look at www.westfaironline.com. Trust me, once you start reading, you won't quit. It is both a complete honor and privilege to bring you today's episode. I initially contacted today's guest back on April 24th, 2017. I'm so excited to have him on our show. As I am a huge fan of his work, I knew he would make an excellent guest. Robin Sharma absolutely delivers today, and then some. I hope you enjoy today's episode. Robin, I'd like to welcome you to the No Quit Living podcast.
Great to be with you, Christopher. Thanks for the invitation.
I appreciate it. So the first question we ask everybody, and I know the answer, but I still have to ask you, is are you ready to bring it today?
Yes, I'm going to give you my best information possible for you and your listeners.
I appreciate it. So the number one objective at No Quit Living, as well as our podcast, is to motivate and inspire our listeners to never give up. And I wanted to ask if you have a personal story of perseverance or a really challenging time that tested you and you could have given up or given in, but you didn't.
Well, I think the very nature of being human is you're going to have times or seasons at the top of the mountain and periods in the valley of darkness. And the human tendency is to try to fight and resist the times that we're in difficulty. And yet we all know that pain is a purifier, and, the best among us take our stumbling blocks and we turn them into stepping stones. And we use our wounds and we make them into wisdom. And so in terms of a story, the first thing that comes to mind is I was a self-published author. I had a book called The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. I was a litigation lawyer, but I had this burning fire in my belly to get the message of the monk who sold his Ferrari out there. And I faced a lot of resistance. My first seminar, 23 people attended. 21 of those people were my own family members. People laughed at my vision to get this book out there to people. But I really believed The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari had a message that was transformational to people. And so even though people laughed at me, and even though people ridiculed me, and even though the first editor of the book wrote a pretty scathing letter to me, I still remember picking up the manuscript and looking at his letter, and he basically said, no one would ever read this book. And I sat in my car feeling deflated, questioning myself, wondering if I was a fool for having this vision. And yet I persisted and I was relentless and I kept on going, and the book got out there and it's since helped millions of people in their lives. So hopefully that's a helpful story for your listeners.
No, I think it's a great story. And I'm just curious, having now sold well over 15 million books, have you ever reconnected with that first person?
That's a great question. And I've heard stories of people who, they received a letter from a critic or some kind of a review or something like that. And they went back and what they did was they told their critic, look, here's my success. Personally, I don't really believe that's the way to go. I don't really have any interest to do that. I learned from the letter, and I think the larger point is everyone has an opinion, right? And what makes us, what handcrafts a great life, I believe, is trusting your instinct. And the very nature of a visionary means you're going to be ridiculed before you're revered. If you look at Galileo, if you look at Elon Musk, if you look at Steve Jobs, if you look at Rosa Parks, the very nature of their vision was they disrupted and terrified the status quo. And that means you're going to get critics. And so the key is just understand critics are generally dreamers who got scared and never got back up. And trust your heart, trust your instinct, trust your impossible vision, even though the world around you thinks it's crazy. Because that's the story of human progress, isn't it?
No, I couldn't agree more, and I'm glad you touched on that, because I think at the end of the day is we all learn from those failures, and I think Zig Ziglar has a famous quote: "Is you're not a failure, you've just failed."
Right. I mean, someone asked me on a podcast yesterday, what would you do if you could talk to your younger self? What advice would you give your younger self? And my answer was I wouldn't give my younger self any advice. I think everything that happens to us can serve us. And personally, I've grown the most, grown in empathy, relatability, creativity, strength, and bravery from the events that had me on my knees. So the ego, Christopher, wants to say, oh, that's bad, but it is our most difficult times professionally, personally, spiritually, that allow us to reclaim the natural heroism that lives inside of us. I mean, the 5 a.m. Club, a lot of it's not just a book on how the greatest people on the planet start their days for exponential creativity and exponential productivity. It's a book that has the 10 rituals of daily genius. It's a book that explains to people how they can recover so they can continually perform at high levels throughout not only the coming years, but the coming decades. It's also, though, a book about the process that happens to us after we leave the perfection of children. I believe when we're kids, we're curious, we're passionate, we're authentic, we're creative, we're full of awe and wonder. And then what happens is society does its work to hypnotize us. And we start getting these series of beliefs that teach us doubt, that teach us to be practical, that teach us to be limited. And when we keep on receiving this messaging from society and our parents and our peers and the media, we literally start to contract and we start to think small and we start to behave small. And so what I tried to do in the 5 a.m. Club is not only make it a manual for mastery and elite performance, but also a handbook for people, for anyone who's interested in saying, I want to remember my primal genius. I want to reconnect with the gifts and talents that I once knew before the world became busy being busy. And I think that's really important, that each of us remembers that what makes genius is not genetics. There's a lot of good science on that. What makes genius are ordinary people who install a series of beliefs, daily behaviors, regular routines, and systems that create the results that geniuses get. And it does start with getting your morning routine right.
So speaking about that, and I have to tell you that I absolutely loved your new book, The 5 a.m. Club. I've actually gifted it to two of my best friends. And as we're always looking to add value to our listeners, I just wanted to ask you personally, before we jump on your book, if you have your own morning routine that you swear by.
I do. In the book, the core of it is the 20-20-20 formula that I've been teaching for many, many years. I sort of hack that, Christopher. So I will do an hour workout first thing in the morning. I usually get up at between 4 and 5. I like a little bit of a runway so I can lay in bed and meditate and visualize. The word that comes to mind is it sets the tone for the day. Just laying there, in the peacefulness and quietude of 4:45 or 5 a.m. and just thinking and setting some intentions and just being present. And then I'll do an hour workout, and then I will do generally, 45 minutes or so of journaling. I've been journaling for close to 30 years, and it's been transformational for me. and then I will generally do some reading and some learning. So that's the 20-20-20 formula in the 5 a.m. Club method is the minimum. I'll say, let's call it the minimum viable morning routine to significantly grow your creativity and performance. And then I think the advanced would be 3 hours of morning routine so you hit the ground running. But the key thing is at least do the 20-20-20 formula. You've probably seen some of the comments from my readers or people on Instagram on the 5 a.m. Club, and they're doing it, and it's just creating some revolutionary improvements in the way that they're living out their days.
No, you know what I love about that is it's 20-20-20, so it's an hour. It's not like you're telling somebody, okay, tomorrow I want you to wake up at 2 a.m. and spend 4 hours doing something. I think when you break it down into bite-sized pieces like you do, it's really attainable. But I wanted to pick your brain real quick on one thing you said. Is you said that you've been journaling for 30 years now. I just wanted to ask you, how did that start, or where did you get, or how did you get introduced to that? Because I think it's something that I do myself, but I don't do it enough. So the fact that you've been doing it for 30 years, I'm really intrigued by that.
Well, great question, Christopher. A lot of the great women and men of the world love journaling, and it's because we all as human beings need a platform or space to think. The most focused, productive producers on the planet have rare air levels of clarity. And clarity comes from introspection. And we live in a world where most people on the planet right now are addicted to distraction, and they're living their days like a 5-alarm fire. And that's part of the value of the 5 a.m. Club. The rest of the world is asleep, and you give yourself a period to think and to reflect. Otherwise, what happens is you're going to spend the best hours of your best days climbing mountains, only to realize 10 years from now, or at the end of your life, you spent your best hours climbing the wrong mountains. So journaling, there's actually in the 5 a.m. Club, there's a lot of models in the book, as you know, and there's actually a deconstruction of the value of journaling. And one of the values is it allows you to think. It allows you to write out your high-value targets. If you're going through a problem, you can pour your pain out onto a crisp white piece of paper and start the process of releasing your pain so you let go of your past. Writing in a journal allows you to, I did an Instagram video this morning. Writing in a journal allows you to stay encouraged. You see, because great entrepreneurs, great industrialists, great humanitarians have one thing in common. They protect their hope. We all have hope of this year running a marathon, hope of finding love, hope of being masterful in our work. We have hope. And I would never minimize the power of hope. But our job as we go out into a challenging world is to protect our hope. And one of the ways I do that is in a journal. I write about who I want to be in a month. I write about what I need to achieve this year. I write about what I want to stand for in the future. I write about my beautiful life 10 years from now. What that does is it allows me, it's fuel to protect my hope and keep me encouraged. So, I could spend a whole day with you talking about the value of journaling, but it's a very powerful morning regime.
Now, I think we probably could spend a couple of days, but just one quick question follow-up to that is, if any of our listeners have not really gotten the chance to get into journaling, is there one piece of advice to have them start small and then build from there?
Absolutely. And you hit it. It's one of my brain tattoos is dream big, start small. Another one is small daily improvements when done consistently over time lead to stunning results. So just go out and buy a journal and start the process of writing. Then people say, well, can I do it on my phone? Can I do it? You can do it whatever way you want. There is good research saying that when you write something out, you engage a part of the brain that drops into more creativity and more thinking. But so I really recommend a paper journal and writing with a pen, and then using different colors in it to bring the journal to life. I also believe very much in collaging. And anyone who's dismissing this will have a look at epigenetics, which you probably know Epigenetics simply is the emerging science that stands for the fact that we have a lot of ability to either upregulate or downregulate our genome. So the past belief system was whatever your genetic code is, you have to live by that, right? Well, we now know that our environment, our daily habits, our morning routine, our consistent thinking can influence the way genes express themselves. What's my point? When you journal and say, here's who I want to be. I want to be braver. I want to be more noble. I want to be productive versus busy. I want to join Robin's 5 a.m. club and run the 2020 method and 2020 method. And I want to do it every day with consistency because that's the DNA of mastery. And I want to live a great life. And I want to influence. When you start writing that every morning in the quietude of pre-dawn, you're actually influencing the way your genome is going to express itself. That's transformational.
No, I couldn't agree more, and I do love myself the actual physical journal, but you did touch on something that was really interesting. Is for some people they might enjoy doing it on their phone or doing it on a tablet, and I think you would agree with me. It's better to do that than to do nothing. But still, I enjoy the actual pen and taking it on the paper as well.
I sure would. I think something is better than nothing. And having said that, part of the value of the 5 a.m. Club and that, what I call in the book, the victory hour, is getting away from technology, getting away from the white screen, getting back to purity. An addiction to distraction is the death of our creative production. We have a lot of people on the planet right now who are hooked. They are cyber zombies. And it's the dopamine and reward system where they just can't break free of looking for likes. And there's a line in the book which is, your phone is costing you your fortune. So what I would really encourage from 5 to 6 in the morning, just keep it pure. Have a paper journal. Learn to meditate. Learn to visualize. Read paper books. Go out and go for a walk. Feel the air again. What that's going to do is it's going to give you some enormous grounding by 6 o'clock. And it's going to connect you with inner peace. And people who say, well, is inner peace important? I'm a business builder. The great titans, and I've worked with a lot of them. Steve Wozniak spoke at one of my events. Richard Branson spoke on my Titan Summit stage. I've worked with billionaires for over 22 years. NBA superstars, etc. Well, what makes an NBA superstar, for example, is grace under pressure. In that moment, the final moment of the championship game, they're at peace. And so, if someone listening is an entrepreneur, or they're a hedge fund manager, or they're mother, father, teacher, pizza maker, 5 to 6 in the morning, setting yourself up physically so you create the neurobiology of mastery, connecting to your peace, connecting to your values. 6 o'clock in the morning, you go out in the world, you're grounded, and you're going to perform much better.
No, I love that, and I agree, and you're sticking to it in the routine. You mentioned meditation. Do you have an app that you use or a program, or how do you go about that?
Again, and people can obviously do whatever's best for them. I don't want to be near technology when I'm meditating. So the way I do it is I get up early, as I've been sharing, and I just lay in bed, and I'll lay there at least 30 minutes. And sometimes I'll do affirmations, mantras, which are very powerful. Let's not roll our eyes at the power of mantras. Mantra actually comes from Sanskrit, thousands and thousands of years of ancient culture. Man means mind. Tra in Sanskrit means freedom. Mantra, free the mind. So you could lay there and do mantras. Often I will close my eyes and visualize a blueprint for my ideal day ahead, which is going to affect epigenetics, my performance, etc. Sometimes I will, simply try to focus on a word. But meditation has been really powerful for me. Anyone who has not meditated, Please don't think of it as anything mystical. It is simply a way to focus your brain in a world where most people have dramatically unfocused brains.
No, I've been trying it myself, and I'm becoming more consistent with it. But I think you're right on the spot. Is that it takes your mind and it calms you and it gets you going. But I just love how you fit that into your morning routine. Because as I said before we went live, I think of the morning routine as owning your morning, owning your day, and as I mentioned to you, being proactive as opposed to reactive. But your book, The 5 a.m. Club, underneath the title is Own Your Morning, Elevate Your Life. And I wanted to just touch on 2 quotes from your book that I absolutely loved. And I just wanted to ask if you wouldn't mind just sharing a little bit about both of them, if that's okay with you.
Of course. Which are the 2 quotes?
So, sweat more in training and you will bleed less in war. And then the second quote absolutely just knocked me over because I'm going through some personal and professional things with my career is all change is hard at first, messy in the middle, and gorgeous at the end.
Yes. Christopher, the first one comes from the Spartan warriors. And you're right. It's sweat more in training and you'll bleed less in war. That's the whole raison d'etre. That's the whole reason for the 5 a.m. Club and the value of it. You get up at 5 o'clock and you do the 20-20-20 formula, and I'm happy to walk your listeners through it. What you're essentially doing is you are sweating before the world wakes up, not only literally, but metaphorically, right? And you're taking that 1 hour victory hour to prepare your 4 interior dimensions. In the 5 a.m. Club, I suggest, and it's a very disruptive idea, but everyone's talking about mindset. You've probably heard it everywhere over the social media. Mindset is everything. In the 5 a.m. Club, I actually say, or suggest very respectfully, mindset is only 25% of personal mastery. You can have a great mindset, a strong psychology, but if you have a weak heart set, in other words, you're full of anger, you're full of sadness, full of disappointment. If your emotional life is a mess, you're not going to be creative, productive, and legendary. So it's not only mindset, it's this word I'm introducing, heart set, but it's not only that, it's health set. If you don't have vitality and energy, you can't execute on world-class ambitions. And then it's the third interior empire, soul set. And for anyone who says, well, soul set, that doesn't apply to me, that sounds very esoteric. I don't think it is. Soul set is about reaching deep into your core, connecting with your inner heroism, and finding a mission that you are going to dedicate your life to that is larger than yourself. And so on that first quote you bring up, Christopher, sweat more in training and you'll bleed less in war, the 5 a.m. Club and the 20-20-20 formula that I teach in the book teaches you how to build that strong core through sweating in the morning. So you go out there and you're literally a force of nature in the day. The second quote that you mentioned, which is one of my brain tattoos, all change is hard at first, messy in the middle, and gorgeous at the end. That applies to what you're going through. And I'm sorry to hear you're going through some challenge, and yet I say this very gently, but I'm not, because we all grow through the messy waters. And the ego has a tendency to say, well, I'm going through something difficult, let me run from it. What I suggest to people is if you're going through something difficult, stay in it as long as possible, because there your growth lies. And so the brain tattoo, all change is hard at first, messy in the middle, gorgeous at the end, means that when you install something like the 5 a.m. Club habit, or working out at the end of the day, or doing work that is masterful versus average, it's going to be hard at first, because that means it's good change. And it's going to be messy in the middle, because you're tearing down your old ways of being and your old habits, like a home renovation, so that you can install the neural architecture and the emotional signatures of the next level of you. So that's messy in the middle. And it's going to be gorgeous at the end, because human beings are built for heroism and growth. And so when you move through the change over 66 days, as I talk about in the book, according to research of University College London, you get to the next level of you. What's better than that? That's the gorgeousness of it.
No, I couldn't agree more as far as going through it, and I think we all go through our challenges, and that's part of the whole MO, not only with our company but also with the podcast. Is it's during those tough times and during those challenges where you grow, and I think in the media world, especially in social media, I think people have it totally flipped around as they see all the goodness and the greatness, and they think, well, that's where you really grow and get better, and when you're winning and when you're on the top. And the reality is it's not. It's during those tough times that allow you to get knocked down but get back up that you get to be the champion in whatever area of life that is.
It's so true. I find what the social media is showing us is a highlight reel of people's best moments and what they want you to see. And the last chapter of the 5 a.m. Club, as you know, it's a surprise ending. The book is a story, as you know, but it talks a lot about Nelson Mandela. And it talks about how when he went to Robben Island, they dug a grave and they asked Nelson Mandela, and he was an elderly man at this time, and they asked him to lay in it, and he thought he was going to die. And the prison guards urinated on him. And in the book, in the last chapter, I talk about what he did in the limestone quarry, how for 10 years he chipped away at limestone. And that was designed to break his spirit because they didn't use the limestone for anything. And the dust damaged his lungs. And yet Nelson Mandela continued. And he was laughed at and he was ridiculed. He said the greatest regret was they wouldn't let him leave Robben Island to attend the death of his eldest son, who was killed in a car accident. And yet, when Nelson Mandela emerged from Robben Island at his inauguration as president of South Africa, he invited the jailer who had tormented him to his inauguration. And he was asked why, and he said, because if I didn't, I'd still be in prison. What I'm suggesting to you is what made Nelson Mandela, Catherine Graham, Steve Jobs, Rosa Parks, or Martin Luther King Jr. It wasn't who they were when they received the awards and were standing at the top of the mountain. What made the greatest business people, creatives, humanitarians of history is how they responded during times of suffering. And I think our society gives suffering and difficulty a bad rap. And, we all go through difficulty. It could be a loss. It could be, perhaps a divorce. It could be an illness. It could be a business issue. Those are the times as you go through them, we fight them. But there your growth lies. That's what opens you up to your wisdom and your bravery and your empathy. And those are the things that allow you to do great things in the world after you get out of the pain of the discomfort.
No, I love that. And I want to switch lanes for a second to ask you might be a tough question, but let's assume that a reader of ours can only take one thing and one thing only from reading your book. What would that be that you'd like them to receive?
Well, that's a great question. I would say the 20-20-20 formula. That whole chapter is, I wouldn't say it if I didn't believe it in my heart and if I haven't experienced people. My clients have used the 20-20-20 formula for close to 20 years to build fortunes, not only economic fortunes, spiritual fortunes, fortunes of creativity and productivity. So the one thing to do from the book is, if you can only do one thing, install the 5 a.m. Club habit by running the 66-day protocol. And I explain how to do that. And then run the 20-20-20 formula, which is, just so your listeners know, the first 20 minutes from 5 to 5:20 is the move pocket. I explain the neuroscience behind that. And I'm happy to share it with you and discuss it with you today. The second pocket, 5:20 to 5:40, is the reflect pocket, where you actually think and you get clarity on your high value targets and you set intentions. So you go out in the world focused. And then the third pocket, 5:40 to 6 o'clock of the 20-20-20 formula, is grow. All the billionaires I coach, and I've coached a lot of them, they have one thing in common. They understand that mission critical is growing, because as you grow your skills, as you grow your mindset, heart set, health set, soul set, as you grow confidence, as you grow industry knowledge, you go out there into the world and you can contribute more value. And the marketplace rewards the woman or the man that contributes the most value. So the 20-20-20 formula is the real starting point.
No, I love that part of the book. And again, before we went live, I was talking to you about the importance of, on our show, how we've been really dissecting the morning routine with a lot of our guests. And the common thing has been basically that same 20-20-20, not to say it's the exact same thing because it's clearly not, but the common thing has been the importance of starting off your day on your own terms, but being consistent and consistently doing the same thing. So I'm so glad that you touched on that. I want to change lanes for a second, and I wanted to ask you, how do you define success, or what does success look like or mean to you?
You know, that's a great question, because I saw a post on the internet the other day by Jim Carrey, and he said, I wish everyone could be rich and famous to realize that's not going to make you happy. And I'm not in any way saying that making money and living a beautiful life isn't important. I think it's really important. And I think one of the main reasons to make a lot of money is so you can be a philanthropist and help people in need. Having said that, in my life, the things that bring me the greatest joy, number one, it's my family, and seeing the success of my children and see them growing up into kind, thoughtful, respectful people. I define success as peak health. There's, you know, I think it was in The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari, or The Greatness Guide, there was a line I used, which is, health is the crown on the well person's head that only the ill person can see. So I define success as great health and great vitality. You know, another metric of success for me, Christopher, is doing work that expresses my creativity and is of helpfulness to the world. And the response to the 5 a.m. Club has been like no other book I've ever written before. So that what that does is I spent 4 years on the book, and I put my heart and soul in it. And, you know, it's so much more than just the 5 a.m. Club and morning routine, which I've been teaching for going on over 20 years. It's now become a cottage industry, and so many people are teaching morning routine. But, you know, success is also growth. I mean, I think if you're not digging deep and getting to know yourself and reclaiming your inner heroism and expressing your creativity, if you're not working through your wounding, if you're not strengthening your character, if you're not building fluency and intimacy with your spiritual life, if you're not expressing your luminosity to the world, I don't consider that success. And I think the final thing is, when I was growing up, my dad used to say something to me, and he said, Robin, when you were born, you cried while the world rejoiced. He said, Robin, live your life in such a way that when you die, the world cries while you rejoice. And that's a big theme of the new book. I mean, the end chapter is really about leadership. Leadership. Leadership is not just for CEOs. Leadership is an opportunity and responsibility of every single one of your listeners. Because really, if I was to distill it, leadership is just about letting go of victimhood. And if you were asking me what leadership is really about, yes, creativity, productivity, etc. But ultimately, it's about being an instrument of service to as many people as possible. And that, to me, is the ultimate measure of success. Just whatever you do and who you are, lift people up versus tear them down.
You know, I love that, and I'm glad that you touched on leaders, because your book that you wrote is The Leader Who Had No Title. I thought it's an amazing book, and the reason I love it is so many people, I think, miss the idea that you don't need to have a title. And what I mean by that is you could be on the team. You don't have to be the captain or the best player or the coach or the owner. You can all lead in different ways. So I'm really glad that you touched on that. And if any of our listeners have not read your books, I would definitely recommend it. But I wanted to just give you an opportunity to tell us a little bit about where our listeners can find you. I know you're on social media, but you also have a pretty neat program that I wanted you to touch on for a second too, which is your absoluteyet.com, if you wouldn't mind touching on that for a minute.
Sure, Christopher. So we only offer this once a year. It's called Your Absolute Best Year Yet. It's a very calibrated and thoughtful and high value online learning program based on videos and webinars that thousands of people have gone through with some very, very strong results. And it's designed to help you make this year the single greatest year of your life yet, in terms of creativity, productivity, prosperity, and impact on the world. And if any of your listeners are interested and they want the details, it comes with 100% money back guarantee, so there's zero risk. They can just go to yourabsolutebestyyearyet.com, yourabsolutebestyyearyet.com, and all the information's right there.
And before we let you go, I also wanted to ask you, what's the best way for our listeners to connect with you on other channels, or I know your website as well? What do you prefer, or where do you think is the best way for our listeners that maybe don't know a lot about your work?
Sure. I'm on Instagram, and my name is Robin Sharma, Sharma, so they can just search it. I think we're over 4 million followers on Facebook, so that's Robin Sharma on Facebook. YouTube, I do a podcast called the Mastery Sessions. I think there's a lot of episodes, very high content. That's on YouTube. And finally, anyone who wants the 5 a.m. Club book, they can just go to the 5amclub.com. And that'll have all the links to order the book. It's in audiobook. And it's, if I may, I just want to share, a lot of us read books, and then after the book, we want to go, we want to know where we go next. And so what I've done is, at no charge whatsoever, at the end of the 5 a.m. Club book is a free 66-day program full of videos and morning mastery meditations. Again, free. It's a 66-day online program to help all the readers of the book install the 5 a.m. Club method and calibrate their morning routine. And the final thing is a percentage of my royalties of the book go to my foundation to help children with leprosy and people going through child poverty get out of that situation. I'm very, very passionate about doing my part to help those in need. So anyone who reads the 5 a.m. Club not only gets a book that I believe and I've heard is transformational, but they also help children in need as well.
No, I think that's incredible. And then the last question is, if you have any parting words you'd like to leave with our listeners.
Well, I'd simply say start something today. It's that brain tattoo I've been teaching. Small daily improvements, when done consistently over time, lead to stunning results. It's stunning where your listeners can be a month from now, 60 days from now. It's what makes the Jordans of the world and the Bransons of the world and the Mother Teresa's of the world and whoever it is that you feel is a hero, is they, against all odds, against their past patterns, against their current condition, they reached deep into their core and started. And they didn't just do it for a day. That's like saying, I want to learn Italian this year. I practiced it for 14 days. I didn't speak the language. It didn't work. You've got to start, and then you've got to get into the quote unquote gym every day. And you've got to do it when it's easy, and you've got to do it when it's hard. But what I'm trying to say is human beings are built with a genius. And here's the genius. It's not necessarily playing the piano or doing art like Picasso. Our genius is that when we make a commitment and then practice it daily, when it's easy and when it's hard, when it's cold and when it's hot, and we do it over time, 66 days, then 90 days, then 180 days, we transform. It's neuroplasticity. It's our emotional adaptability. We can become the greatest version of ourselves over time, but it begins with your listeners doing something today and then practicing it over time until it becomes our new normal.
No, I love that. And I need to tell you that I absolutely, again, I loved your book. And for our listeners out there, if you have not gotten a chance to pick up a copy of it, whether it's audiobook or the actual physical book, definitely get your copy of the 5 a.m. Club. And Robin, I just need to thank you for not only your time, but the amazing insight you share with us. And hopefully we can connect again soon.
It'd be a pleasure, Christopher, to reconnect. And thanks for the invitation. I hope it helps a lot of people.
Thank you for listening to episode number 177. When it comes to some of my personal favorite shows, today's episode definitely stands out. I took over 5 pages of notes while conducting this interview, and the time absolutely flew by. A common theme throughout our show has been studying morning routines or rituals, and the importance of owning your morning, the start to your day, and being proactive as opposed to reactive. In his new book, The 5 a.m. Club, Robin takes the entire morning routine to a whole new level, and he went pretty deep into it on today's show. One of the best things about being the host of the No Quit Living podcast is the opportunity to connect with some absolutely incredible and amazing people. I have followed, read, and been a huge fan of Robin Sharma for many years. If you haven't read or seen any of his work, I would highly recommend that you check him out. The focus of today's show was Robin's morning routine and his new book. After we finished the recording and said goodbye, I was hit with a huge feeling of gratitude. I was extremely grateful to Robin for both sharing his time as well as his incredible insight. I immediately shared the initial recording with a dear friend of mine, and I got out my journal and started writing. Robin moved me to take action, and I'm so appreciative to have been able to connect with him. As the number one objective of our show is to motivate and inspire people to never give up, it is so amazing when we get to connect with some of these amazing guests that really and truly pay it forward. I would like to challenge each and every one of our listeners. I challenge you to really take a look at your own morning and how you start your day. There is no right answer for everyone, and when it comes to a morning routine, there is no one-size-fits-all. Look at your life and how you start your day and your morning. Are you focused, disciplined, with a consistent routine that truly works for you? Or instead, you just go with the flow and hope for the best? I suggest taking different people's ideas, suggestions, and seeing what works for you. Not what works for a coworker or a friend, but try a few different things and figure out what truly works best for you. Identifying a morning routine isn't easy. It's not simple, and it definitely won't happen overnight. It will be challenging and difficult at first, but in the end, it will be worth it. As you go for your greatness and continue to attack 2019, I would like to leave you with Robin Sharma's incredible quote on change. All change is hard at first, messy in the middle, and gorgeous at the end. And lastly, to our listeners, thank you. We truly appreciate your time, and we hope our episodes inspire you to keep on attacking life and never giving up. To quote Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, it's always too early to quit.